The metallic walls of the cell were cold, silent, except for the faint hum of the energy field that kept the human prisoner restrained. He sat cross-legged on the hard floor, trying to ignore the ache in his muscles, his mind racing through every possible escape scenario. Yet none of them seemed realistic. This was no ordinary prison. He had been captured by the Jackyr, a species known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence, their ruthlessness, and their complete disregard for human life. He had flown into their territory on a diplomatic mission, hoping to negotiate a trade agreement that could benefit his home planet. It was supposed to be a simple delivery of supplies and an exchange of information. But when the Jackyr warships had ambushed his shuttle, he knew he had walked straight into a trap. Now he was face to face with a challenge far beyond his usual calculations, surviving the intrigue of an alien empire, earning the trust of its ruler, and, if luck was on his side, escaping alive. The door to the cell opened with a soft hiss, and he tensed immediately. He had been alone for hours, and the sudden movement made his instincts scream. A figure stepped inside, regal and commanding, adorned in golden armor that shimmered in the dim light. The Jackyr Queen. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, examined him like a scientist studying a rare specimen. "Human," she said, her voice smooth but carrying a weight that pressed against his chest. "I have watched your people for centuries. They are amusing, predictable, and yet occasionally dangerous. You have survived where most would have fallen. That is why you are here." He swallowed hard, nodding slightly. I am at your service, Your Majesty," he said cautiously, careful not to sound submissive. The Queen circled him slowly, her gaze unyielding. "You will not be my servant, human. That would be beneath you. But your life is not entirely your own. You are here because I allow it, and your freedom will come at a price." The weight of her words settled over him like a stone. He had expected interrogation, maybe even torture. But this was something different, something strategic. "You are to marry my daughter," the Queen announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. The word struck him like a meteor. He blinked, trying to process. "Marry your daughter?" "Yes," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Princess Talira, she is widowed, skilled, and strong. She requires a partner who can match her intellect, her strength, and her ability to navigate complex situations. You, human, may serve that purpose." He shook his head. I am honored, Your Majesty, but this is impossible. I am a human. I am not of your world, I am not." "Not worthy," the Queen interrupted, a faint smile curving her lips. "Perhaps, but then again, humans have a history of defying expectations. That is what makes you interesting. That is why I have not executed you like so many others." The cell door hissed again and she stepped aside. A smaller figure entered, Princess Talira herself. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and slightly skeptical. There was grief etched into her features, a memory of loss that still lingered despite her composed demeanor. "You are the human?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "Yes," he replied, rising slightly from the floor. "I am, and I assure you I mean no harm." Talira's gaze studied him. There was a flicker of curiosity there, an intelligence that matched her mother's reputation. "Your survival in our territory is remarkable," she said. "Most humans would not last a day. Why do you think you have?" He considered carefully. "I think humans are underestimated," he said finally. "People think we are fragile, limited, slow to adapt. But we survive because we learn quickly, because we adapt faster than many realize, and we fight when we must." She regarded him silently for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Perhaps. That will be interesting to observe." The Queen's voice cut through the air. "You will be held here under supervision. If you prove yourself worthy of her, human, your freedom will follow. If not—" Her meaning hung ominously in the air. As the Queen and Talira departed, leaving him alone again, he let out a slow breath. His situation was precarious, but it was also an opportunity. He was not just a prisoner. He was a human, underestimated and overlooked, and perhaps that was exactly the advantage he needed. Over the next few days, he observed the court from afar, noting patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. The guards were disciplined but predictable. The technology, while advanced, had gaps in logic that a human mind could exploit. And the queen herself, for all her intelligence, relied heavily on ceremony, protocol, and hierarchy, things humans could manipulate subtly if approached carefully. One evening, as he sat quietly, a small object appeared on the floor of his cell, a simple puzzle left by Princess Talira. He examined it carefully, interlocking pieces with alien markings that formed a complex pattern. Most humans would have dismissed it or failed outright. But he spent hours studying it, turning the pieces, testing combinations. Finally, with a quiet click, the pattern aligned, revealing a miniature data chip inside. He held it in his hands, a small grin tugging at the corners of his lips. Talira had tested him, and he had passed. The next day she visited again. "You solved it," she said simply, as if the act itself held no meaning. But he could see the slight shift in her expression, a hint of respect, perhaps even curiosity. "It was a puzzle," he said, shrugging lightly. "Humans like puzzles." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Perhaps we will see if humans are capable of more than puzzles." Days turned into weeks, and his understanding of the court deepened. He noticed rivalries among advisors, tensions between military leaders, and cracks in the Queen's authority that were invisible to most of her subjects. Each observation was a potential tool, a small advantage that could tip the scales if used wisely. Meanwhile, the Queen continued to visit him occasionally, speaking of philosophy, history, and strategy. She tested his reasoning, his patience, his ability to anticipate outcomes. Every session left him mentally exhausted but sharper, more attuned to the subtleties of alien politics. He also learned more about Princess Talira. She was no mere figurehead. She commanded fleets, negotiated alliances, and strategized defenses. She had lost her husband to a brutal war, yet she remained unbowed, determined to protect her people and her position. He realized that any union with her would require not just diplomacy but genuine understanding, respect, and perhaps even friendship. One night, as he stared at the stars visible through the high windows of the palace, he reflected on the unusual circumstances of his life. He had been captured, humiliated, and yet he was still alive. He was learning, observing, and planning. And for the first time, he allowed himself to think not just of survival, but of influence, of possibility, of changing the course of events in ways that no one, especially the Queen, could predict. The hum of the energy field that confined him no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a challenge, and humans, he knew, thrived on challenges. A soft knock at the door brought him back to the present. Princess Talira entered quietly, her posture relaxed but eyes alert. "I have been watching you," she said. "You think too small. You are clever, but cleverness alone is not enough here." He smiled faintly. "I know, but humans often surprise those who underestimate them." She considered him silently, then placed a small communicator on the floor. "Tomorrow, you will meet some of our commanders. Observe. Learn, do not underestimate anyone, including yourself." As she left, the human understood the subtle shift that had occurred. He was no longer merely a prisoner. He was a participant in the game, a player whose mind could turn the tide. And though the path ahead was fraught with danger, he felt an unfamiliar thrill. The opportunity to prove that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could make a difference in a galaxy that thought them insignificant. For the first time since his capture, he allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Not just hope for freedom, but hope that humans, clever and persistent, could achieve far more than the galaxy had imagined. And in that realization, he found the spark that would guide his every move in the days to come. The next morning, the human was escorted from his cell to a vast chamber filled with towering holographic displays, alien artifacts, and dozens of Jacquier commanders. Their armor gleamed under the soft light, each one bearing the weight of authority, experience, and unspoken hostility toward him. He could feel their eyes on him, curious, skeptical, dismissive. Princess Talira was already there, standing near the head of the room, her posture straight, her gaze calm but intense. "These are the commanders of our fleet," she said. "They will brief you on current operations and strategic challenges. Watch carefully, speak wisely, and remember, underestimating anyone in this room could cost you dearly." The human bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than submission. "Understood, Princess." As the briefings began, he listened carefully. The Jacquier were brilliant tacticians, but their plans followed rigid patterns. Their technology was advanced, but often relied on assumptions about enemy behavior that were predictable. He realized humans could exploit these tendencies. Small deviations, unpredictability, and creative improvisation could turn the tide in their favor. One commander, a tall figure with crimson markings along his chitinous face, spoke arrogantly. "If you think a human mind can understand the complexities of our fleet operations, you are mistaken. Your species is slow, disorganized, and fragile. Observing is the best you can hope for." The human kept his expression neutral. "Perhaps," he replied evenly. But humans adapt quickly to situations, and we often see solutions that others overlook. The room fell silent for a moment, the commanders exchanging glances. Talira's eyes flicked toward him, a subtle acknowledgement that she had anticipated this response. Over the following days, he began to observe, learn, and subtly influence the operations. He noticed that supply lines were vulnerable at points where alien doctrine, assumed loyalty, and discipline would prevent disruption. He noted that enemy scouts always approached from predictable vectors, relying on sensors tuned to detect conventional movement. And he began to propose small adjustments to strategy, tests, experiments, not overtly revolutionary, but enough to pique the curiosity of Princess Talira and her closest advisors. One evening, Talira approached him quietly as he reviewed fleet maps. "You are clever," she said, a faint smile crossing her lips. "But cleverness is not enough. You must demonstrate judgment. Humans often confuse boldness with wisdom. Do you understand the difference?" He nodded. "Yes, boldness risks everything at once. Wisdom finds advantage without unnecessary loss. I hope to show you that humans can do both, when needed." Her gaze softened slightly. "We shall see. Tomorrow, you will accompany me on an observation mission. Watch closely and remember what you see. The fleet will be tested soon, and every detail matters." The next day, he was taken aboard a sleek command cruiser. From the observation deck, he watched the alien fleet maneuver with precision, testing formations against holographic simulations of enemy incursions. He studied their movements carefully, noting timing, spacing, and predictable patterns. Then he suggested small changes, shifts in formation, subtle changes in attack sequences, that the alien commanders initially resisted but ultimately allowed, seeing little harm in minor adjustments. The results were undeniable. In simulated engagements, the minor modifications improved response time and reduced exposure to risk. The human suggestions were not dramatic, but they worked, subtly, efficiently, and without drawing attention to him as the source of genius. By the end of the week, whispers began among the commanders. Some were annoyed, some skeptical, but all were forced to acknowledge that the humans' insights had merit. Even Princess Talira's mother, the Queen, observed these developments quietly, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of interest and approval. A sudden alarm shattered the calm. The cruiser's sensors detected a rogue faction fleet approaching a contested sector near the outer colonies. These rebels were Jacquier defectors, cunning and unpredictable, their attacks a combination of guerrilla tactics and advanced weaponry. The human analyzed the data quickly. "Their approach vectors are consistent with their previous raids," he said. They expect us to respond in a standard formation. If we use that expectation against them, we can channel their forces into a trap and disable them with minimal losses. The commanders exchanged uneasy glances. The plan was bold, unconventional, and risky. Yet Princess Talira looked at him with quiet determination. "We follow your guidance," she said. "You will help direct our fleet, show us what humans can do." In the ensuing battle, the human strategy proved superior. By exploiting the rebels' assumptions, the fleet funneled the enemy into choke points, disabled critical ships, and forced a retreat with minimal casualties. The alien commanders, many of whom had doubted him, now looked at him with grudging respect. When the battle concluded, the human stood quietly on the bridge as the Queen arrived. "Impressive," she said softly. "Your methods are unconventional but effective. Perhaps humans are not as simple as many of my advisors claim." He inclined his head. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Humans survive because we adapt. We learn, improvise, and respond when others are rigid. That is all." The Queen's eyes gleamed with a mixture of amusement and calculation. "And yet, surviving is not the same as thriving. I will see if you can thrive in my court and with my daughter." Over the next weeks, the human continued to demonstrate value. He suggested improvements to fleet logistics, communication systems, and defensive protocols. He also began working closely with Princess Talira, not as a subordinate but as a partner. They debated strategy, tested simulations, and exchanged insights. She challenged him constantly, pushing him to think beyond conventional limits, and he met her challenges with ingenuity and calm resolve. Their partnership began to shift the perception of the human among the Jacquier. He was no longer merely a prisoner or an outsider. He was a contributor, a strategist, and increasingly, a trusted advisor. Rumors spread through the court that the human might be more capable than many native commanders. One evening, Talira invited him to the palace gardens, a rare place of serenity in the otherwise tense court. "You have changed the perception of humans here," she said, her voice quiet. "Not all of them, perhaps, but you. You have made people reconsider what your kind is capable of." He looked at her, thoughtful. "I did not come here to prove anything for them. I came to survive. But I understand that humans can do more than survive. They can influence, protect, and sometimes inspire." Talira studied him for a moment. "Perhaps your presence here is more important than even you realize. The Queen has her eyes on more than you think. She tests, observes, and measures everything. And now, she measures your mind against hers." He nodded. "Then I must be ready. Not just to survive her tests, but to demonstrate that humans are more than she expects." The following day, a new threat emerged. A coalition of rival alien houses sought to challenge the Queen's rule, exploiting her preoccupation with the human and the fleet. They launched a coordinated series of attacks: sabotage on supply lines, assassination attempts on advisors, and sudden strikes on outlying colonies. The human and Princess Talira worked tirelessly to counter these moves. They devised strategies that blended human ingenuity with Jacquier strength. They anticipated enemy moves, created diversions, and protected vulnerable assets. Time and again, their plans outperformed conventional tactics, minimizing losses and securing the Queen's position. The Queen herself observed these developments with growing respect. The human, she realized, had a quality that few Jacquier possessed: the ability to see beyond protocol, to anticipate unpredictability, and to turn disadvantage into opportunity. His cleverness was not reckless. It was calculated, precise, and effective. One night, after a particularly exhausting day of strategy sessions, Talira approached him privately. "You are changing the course of this court," she said softly. "And I cannot help but wonder how much of this is because you are human and how much because you are exceptional." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps both. Humans are often underestimated, but sometimes being underestimated is the advantage." She nodded, a faint smile appearing. Then we shall continue this partnership, for the good of the court, the fleet, and perhaps for something more. As the days passed, the human realized that his situation had transformed. He was no longer merely a captive awaiting judgment. He was a strategist, a partner, and a symbol of human ingenuity. His ideas were reshaping the court, protecting the queen and her daughter, and proving that humans could achieve far more than the galaxy had imagined. And yet, he knew the challenge was far from over. The queen still measured him, testing his limits. Rival factions still plotted. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. But he felt a growing confidence, an understanding that humans, clever and persistent, could influence events in ways that others could not anticipate. In the quiet moments of reflection, he realized that survival was no longer his only goal. He sought influence, respect, and the chance to prove that humanity, underestimated and overlooked, could make a difference on a galactic scale. As the night sky glimmered through the palace windows, he prepared for the battles to come, strategic, political, and perhaps even personal. The human had become more than a prisoner. He had become a force that the Jacquier could neither ignore nor dismiss. And in that realization, he found purpose, determination, and the spark that would guide him toward the ultimate HFY moment still waiting on the horizon. The galaxy held its breath. Word had spread that a coalition of rival alien houses, envious of the queen's power and unsettled by the human who had earned influence in her court, were planning a full-scale invasion of her sector. Unlike previous skirmishes, this assault would be swift, coordinated, and merciless. The queen's forces were strong, but even she knew that underestimating the coalition would be catastrophic. The human stood on the bridge of the flagship alongside Princess Talira. The room hummed with activity as commanders prepared battle plans, recalibrated shields, and deployed reconnaissance drones. Every eye was on the display, every mind calculating the threats and possibilities. "They are approaching from multiple vectors," one commander reported. "If we respond conventionally, we risk severe losses." The humans studied the holographic map, tracing the projected paths of the enemy fleet. "They expect us to react according to standard doctrine," he said. "If we use their assumptions against them, we can divide their forces, isolate their strongest units, and neutralize them without exposing our fleet unnecessarily." Talira's gaze held both admiration and concern. "It is bold, risky. Are you certain this will work?" He met her eyes calmly. "It will work if we stay adaptable, anticipate their moves, and act faster than they expect. The key is to make them believe we are weaker, less prepared, while actually controlling the battlefield." The queen entered quietly, observing the discussion with her usual inscrutable expression. "I have watched your strategies grow more sophisticated each day," she said. "You are no longer merely a human. You are a mind capable of shaping events. Today, that mind will be tested." Hours later, the battle began. From the observation deck, the human watched as the enemy fleet advanced, their formations tight and disciplined. The first wave of attacks struck, but instead of reacting predictably, the human had orchestrated a subtle retreat, drawing the enemy into carefully prepared channels. Mines and sensor interference slowed their advance, while hidden ambush points allowed select strike teams to disable critical vessels. The alien commanders, initially skeptical, followed his lead. Even the queen allowed herself a small nod of approval as the plan unfolded. The human strategy was not flashy. It relied on patience, timing, and precise understanding of the enemy's expectations. Yet it worked flawlessly. When the enemy fleet reached the first ambush, chaos erupted among the attackers. Ships were trapped, their movements anticipated and countered. The human strategy exploited every flaw in their approach. He had studied their psychology, predicted their patterns, and now, each move they made was anticipated and turned against them. Princess Talira moved alongside him, directing the fleet's movements with confidence. "They are falling into our channels," she said, her voice steady. "Maintain pressure. Focus on disabling their command ships first." The human's mind raced through the possibilities. He knew the coalition's leaders would attempt a countermove, a desperate strike to regain control. He calculated the likely vectors, adjusted fleet positions, and prepared a trap that was both defensive and offensive, ensuring that even if the enemy tried a bold maneuver, it would fail spectacularly. Hours passed. The battle raged across multiple sectors, yet the Queen's fleet, guided by the human strategy and Talira's command, maintained an almost impossible coherence. Enemy ships fell one by one, their formations breaking apart under precise, unconventional tactics. The coalition's attempts to regroup were met with clever feints, ambushes, and diversions, each one exploiting the assumption that humans were too fragile or simple to plan such operations. At one critical moment, a large enemy battleship, the flagship of the rival coalition, broke through the outer defenses and moved toward the Queen's capital. The human recognized the danger instantly. "We cannot allow that ship to reach the inner sector," he said. "Talira, initiate the interception sequence. Use our decoy vessels to draw them into the gravity fields near the asteroid belt. Their engines will be slowed, and our strike teams can neutralize them." Talira's fingers flew across the controls. "Understood," she said. "All units follow the human's instructions." The maneuver was daring, but it worked perfectly. The enemy flagship became trapped in the asteroid belt, its movements hindered, while strike teams disabled its engines and weapons. The remaining enemy vessels, seeing their flagship immobilized, began to retreat chaotically. The human strategy had not only neutralized the immediate threat, but also caused the coalition to lose morale and coordination. As the battle ended, silence fell over the bridge. The human, exhausted but composed, watched the retreating enemy. He had anticipated every move, calculated every possibility, and executed a strategy that few in the galaxy could have imagined. The Queen approached, her presence commanding attention even in the aftermath of victory. She regarded him with measured intensity. "You have done what many would have deemed impossible," she said. "You did not merely survive the battle, you shaped it. Humans are often underestimated, but you have proven that a human mind can rival even the greatest of Jacquier strategists." He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than submission. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I merely observed, adapted, and acted." Humans survive and thrive through observation and ingenuity. That is all. Talira stepped forward, her expression a mixture of pride and admiration. "You have not only saved the fleet and my people," she said softly, "but you have earned their respect. You have proven that humans are capable of much more than anyone expected." The Queen turned her gaze to Talira. "It is time, then," she said. "The promise I made must now be fulfilled. Human, you are free, and the question of marriage is yours to accept should you choose." The human paused. Freedom had always been the goal, but this moment was different. He had fought, strategized, and proven his worth not merely as a survivor, but as an equal among beings far superior in technology and tradition. Now he had the choice to cement that influence and forge a partnership built on trust, mutual respect, and shared achievement. He looked at Talira, seeing not only a princess, but a commander, a strategist, and a person who had respected his mind as much as his actions. "I accept," he said finally with calm certainty. The Queen's approval was subtle but unmistakable. "Very well. Then let it be known. The human who was once a prisoner is now a partner in our court, and a symbol of the potential of his kind." In the following weeks, preparations for the Union proceeded alongside continued strategic operations. The human continued to advise the fleet, not as an outsider, but as an integral part of the command structure. His insights strengthened the Queen's rule, secured the sector, and showcased the ingenuity and resilience of humanity to a galaxy that had long dismissed it. The day of the ceremony arrived. The palace was filled with dignitaries, commanders, and representatives from across the sector. Yet all eyes were drawn to the human and Princess Talira. They stood side by side, partners in more than ceremony, partners in strategy, in survival, and in mutual respect. The Queen spoke, her voice resonant and commanding. Let this day be remembered not only as a union of two beings, but as a celebration of the potential of humanity. They are clever, adaptable, and resilient. They have proven that even the smallest and most underestimated of species can influence the fate of the galaxy. Applause echoed through the chamber, but it was more than ceremonial. It was respect earned through action, not position. Humans had carved their place in the galaxy not through dominance or brute force, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. As the ceremony concluded, the human and Talira looked at each other with quiet understanding. Words were unnecessary. Their partnership had been forged through shared trials, mutual respect, and recognition of each other's strengths. Together, they represented a new balance of power in the galaxy, one where underestimated species, clever minds, and adaptable strategies could thrive against any odds. The human reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a captive, isolated and vulnerable, to a trusted strategist and partner of the most powerful court in the sector. Humanity had once been dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked. Now they had earned a permanent place in the galaxy's story, and as he gazed out at the stars through the palace windows, he realized that this was only the beginning. Humans would continue to surprise, to adapt, and to rise wherever they were underestimated. Their journey was far from over, but the spark had been lit, and the galaxy would never again dismiss what a human mind could accomplish. For the first time, he felt not only freedom but purpose. The battle had been won, respect had been earned, and humanity had proven itself in a galaxy that had long doubted it. He took Talira's hand, feeling the strength, intelligence, and resolve in her grip. Together, they would face future challenges, protect their people, and show the galaxy that humans, clever and persistent, could shape destiny itself. The stars outside seemed brighter, not just for him, but for all of humanity. They had survived, adapted, and thrived. And in that triumph, the human felt a profound truth. Underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, humans could achieve greatness that others could scarcely imagine. And so the human's journey, once bound by imprisonment, had transformed into a story of respect, influence, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. The Queen's promise had been fulfilled, but more than that, humans had proven themselves not just worthy, but indispensable. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Never underestimate a human.